Real quick, before we get started in the video, you guys, I just want to let you know the channel just surpassed a major milestone of 50,000 subscribers. Now, maybe that's not a lot to some people, but it is to me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. Now, it is kind of a cliche that YouTubers will be thanking their audience, but just because something's cliche doesn't mean it's not true. Because I just really appreciate when you guys will take the time to watch my videos to either learn or be entertained by what I'm doing. I know how valuable your guys' time is. I really appreciate that. So when you do give that to me, I know what it's worth. So thank you again for that. Now, with that being said, I understand that what I'm working on here with the twin charged Magnum being fabrication heavy isn't all of your guys' cup of tea. Maybe there's some different things you'd like to see on the channel. I am looking to kind of switch things up a little bit, make it a bit more fresh. If you guys could leave your comments down below on some things maybe you'd like to see about the channel, some different things you'd like to see done in the way I film the videos, edit the videos, any of that, I'll take any and all suggestions. I like constructive criticism, gives me some ideas moving forward. Now on to our main video. Hey, welcome back to Reignited and our twin charged Magnum project. Now we're gonna pick this video up right where the last one left off. So in our previous video, if you didn't see it, we had some issues with our aluminum valve covers that we were using, that we were incorporating both the PCV function and our oil fill locations. Let's go ahead and see if this thing actually fits. Currently the answer is no. That did not work out. We had to revert to some composite style valve covers. So now we're gonna have to modify this intake manifold that I've completely custom made to incorporate both of those components. I've had a long time to think about it, try to figure out how I want to attack this thing. I think I've got a pretty good plan. Let's get into it. So the very first thing we need to do here on our intake manifold, you can see our machine flanges here, that this portion here and this portion here, that is where the factory PCV and oil fill locations are designed. Now, I just had James Long, who made these for me, boring research. Thank you again so much for that. I had him leave these blank because, and not actually open them up because I decided that I wasn't actually going to use them. But now I am, so we need to go ahead and open up these areas right here on both sides, make sure there's adequate flow for both. Okay, excellent. We have our ports drilled out here. They're ready to go. Now let me talk about my solution for how I'm going to actually make these things function. Now, if you'll recall, one of the reasons that I did not do this initially is that because there's a very limited amount of room on the front side of these flanges here, I wouldn't be able to weld all the way around that, like say if I was welding a 10 AN bung on there, something like that. Well, I've come up with an alternate solution here that I think is going to work out. Success, we've got this rear PCV all finished up on here. Now, I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I think it's about what I was going for. So what I ended up having to do was essentially build an aluminum box that came off of the runners itself and then weld the fitting to the top of that box. That way I could get all the way around it. I think it turned out well, good enough for what we're doing here. Now, the rear one was the easy side. Now we've got to switch over and do the front side, which also has to be not only a box for a PCV, but also has to double as our oil fill location. So I've got to build it a little bit differently and a little bit bigger so we can weld on our oil fill cap. All right, you'll notice this rather large goiter we have on the side of our intake manifold. Now, this is one of the reasons that I didn't want to do this initially because I knew it would upset the aesthetic balance of the intake manifold having to do something like this. But you got to do what you got to do. In the end, I'm fairly happy with how this came out. It shouldn't be too obtrusive once it's actually in the vehicle with the fuel rails on there and all of that. And as a nice upshot here, the oil fill location is far more accessible than the place I was putting it in, which is beneath one of the intercooler pipes. So all in all, I think this should work out okay. Let's give you guys a closer shot of exactly how this turned out. So the next thing you guys are going to see me do with this intake manifold, I want to go ahead and smoke test this thing because I have done a metric ton of welding on it and I want to make sure that there's no leaks before we put this thing into service. All right, here we are at the end of another long day at work, but I have my manifold here. I have this thing. You can see I have it all covered in painter's tape because essentially what we're doing is we're trying to find any potential leaks with the system. So what I have here is an EELD machine, evaporative emissions leak detector, essentially a smoke machine. So if you hit the button on it, you can see it starts smoking away pretty good. Now obviously this isn't exactly the same as running full boost through the manifold, but this should be a good test to see if we have any pinhole leaks in my welds. So obviously the goal here is I want to stick this thing in here, smoke test it, and not find any smoke leaking out. Do I expect to find none? Not really. I expect to find maybe 1 or 2 minor leaks that I can hopefully get to go ahead and seal them up properly. But anyway, let's get to it. Let's go ahead and smoke test this manifold. All right, so probably tough to see on camera, but I did identify a couple areas of concern here already. So we'll go ahead and mark those. Try again. All right, you guys, we got our smoke test all finished up there. As you may have been able to tell from the video, there was quite a bit of smoke coming out from different areas. Now, I was certainly expecting to find a couple of different pinhole areas, which I did find, and I was able to mark those. We'll get those welded up. But there was a lot more smoke coming out than what I expected. And what I realized is that the vast majority of it was coming from the back side of our intake plate right here. Now, if you guys have watched this whole project all the way through, you'll know that I did not weld the back side of this runner here all the way, well, all of these runners on the inside edge because there's no way to get the torch in there to do that. So what I did instead was I welded the inside of the runners all the way around. Now, unfortunately, due to the kind of really tough angle to get in there, I did not do a good enough job on some of these runners welding the corners specifically, and that's where most of that smoke was leaking through. But honestly, that test did exactly its job. It showed me some flaws that I have in this manifold and that I need to correct before I actually use it. If I actually just put this thing straight onto the vehicle, I would be having some massive boost leak issues, and that would not be good. So as demoralizing as it really was seeing that much smoke coming out of this thing, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. I can address that now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and weld these things, make sure I'm getting good penetration all the way around on all of the runners. Go ahead and do a quick run through on all of them, finish up a couple of these pinhole sections that I found, and then we'll go back and smoke test it again. At that point, if there's any more holes that I find, we'll go ahead and address them until this manifold is fully ready to go. So nothing left to do but to do it. Let's start welding. I think I'm going to do the easiest weld first, and that's going to be this one right along the front edge here. There's about 3 little pinholes I found in just this seam, so I went ahead and cleaned this thing up. We're going to run a secondary pass right over the top of this. Should be an easy enough fix for that one. Now, something else that I have to remember is that a lot of these welds were done when I was kind of getting back into welding aluminum. It had been quite some time since I had done it. Now, after welding all of this and welding everything else in this car, I really have a fairly decent rhythm for it. So my newer welds are obviously going to be quite a bit better. So I can't really beat myself up too much about it. Welding is just so much about seat time and how much time you spend doing it. I was just out of practice, so that's kind of what you get. So anyway, that was one of the easier ones. That one's all finished up. Let's try to hit some of these other pinholes, then we'll start getting the inside of these runners done. Now specifically, these are the areas where I'm having the most trouble, is getting right here down in this very corner. And you can kind of see in there that it's welded, but it must not have flowed cleanly into this corner because that's where we're getting our leaks from. The majority of them is from these corners on the insides of the runners. So again, I'm going to go through all of these runners right here, do all of them on both sides, and we'll see what we get. Now, it feels like I've said this about 100 times throughout this project, but we have one last thing to do to make sure our intake manifold is all finished up, I hope. And that is we're going to be adding an air temperature sensor to it. Now, this is a GM style sensor. And the reason for this is because originally I was going to put that sensor into the intercooler pipe, but that would not give us true accurate data of exactly what this air is that's going into our engine. So instead, we're going to put it directly into the back of the intake manifold. Now, the reason for that is because, as you know, we have our turbocharger. Now, when you compress air, that makes it hotter. So then that air moves through the front intercooler, which should cool it back down a little bit. But then, of course, you're going into a root style blower, which the alternative name for these style blowers is a heating blower because it heats up that air a lot. So this sensor should give us some real accurate data to work with, which is going to be critical when we're going to be tuning this thing down the road. Now, a lot of you guys had some questions about that too. I am going to try to do some of the base setup myself, just to the point where I can get it running, but I am not a tuner. I would like to be sometime in the future, but currently that is not my skill set. So there is a professional here locally. He has a fantastic reputation, has done a lot of crazy vehicles. I'm hoping to introduce myself to him, see if he's excited about working on this project. Hopefully he's willing to be involved in it, and we can get this thing tuned and really make some good, safe, reliable power. Okay, let's go ahead and get the hole drilled in this intake manifold, get this 3/8 MPT bung welded on, get this sensor installed. So is this the most beautiful intake manifold you've ever seen? No, of course it's not, but I think it looks okay, especially for being a homemade unit. I'm really proud of the work that I put into this thing. Let me know what you guys think down below. There it is, guys. We have our intake manifold completely modified now for our PCV system, our oil fill location, and now our air intake temp sensor. So that is going to do it for this manifold, and that's going to do it for this episode as well. Now, I know this was kind of a short episode, but rest assured, I have been working on other aspects of the vehicle that you guys will see in the next episode. I hope you guys will join me for that. Until then, we'll see you next time on Reignited.